Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Primis Propositions Vodcast here, the Lion Roar. I'm Matt Brown, Head of Proposition, and I'm joined by my colleague Nikki Hemmings, Proposition Manager. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Matt, and hi everyone again to our next episode of Hear the Lion Roar.
I know, I can't believe we're in March already. Where is this year going? We've got a cracking guest on today. So we're joined by LV's National Account Manager. We've got Carl Hurd. Hiya, Carl.
Hi, Carl.
Good morning, or good afternoon, whatever time we are of the day you're listening to this one. But hello, both.
We've just crossed the 12 o'clock, haven't we? So we could go for either, depending on how we're feeling. Excellent. Nice to see you, Carl. So I think before we get cracking and give you a bit of a drilling around LV and consumer duty and lots of exciting stuff we're going to be talking about today, tell us a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about me. So for me, I started actually on the provider side of this industry about 23 years ago. So back in 2000, so a little while ago. Prior to that, I was actually a mortgage and protection advisor. Did that for a number of years. Came actually really out of sales because I was a state agency. I'm back when I left school, back in retail. So pretty much sales all the way through. And in the provider space, been with LV, crikey, took about 16 years now, I think, at LV. But always been within protection, and obviously very close to that and passionate to that as well. So
fantastic. Thanks for that, Carl. Well, it's my turn to start the questions off. So as Matt called it a drilling, but I hope you don't feel it's a drilling. But let's get into questions. And obviously a massive topic at the moment, Carl, is consumer duty. I believe you're on the project team over there at LV as well. What has been your experience of working on the project, and what are the takeouts for LV and also for brokers as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure who I upset really at LV that they let me be the business owner for consumer duty from our side, at least from the protection sales. But yeah, maybe I'll come more one-to-one. I'll have a chat with Mike Fowler and find out why I got it around my neck. But it has been a really interesting project, and I was actually involved in. But for the speak of everybody in the FCA world, PS215 was the last project we had, a big one, which is all about fair value. And I think what's really different here is fair value was very much an exercise for the FCA. And there was a lot of ticking of boxes, if you like, from that perspective. Consumer duty feels very different. For a start, straight away, it's very much down there with the advisors as well and with the firms. It's not just about what we have to do as a provider. And I think the biggest interest with this as well is the FCA apparently have committed half their annual budget to consumer duty. So the first thing you realise, very quickly we realised from our internal project, this isn't just a rehash of sort of TCF, treating customers fairly. It has been a very big project from our side, obviously taking it very seriously. And as I said, it's about the advisors, the firms, the business owners, not just us as a provider. So we've been looking a lot at what support we can offer as well. So again, I've led on that project. So we've spent a lot of time with our account managers to make sure they're fully aware of what consumer duty means for advisors and firms. And actually what we've done then, from a bit of feedback that we've got back from those firm owners mainly as well, and yourselves as networks, we're now building collateral and stuff on our advisor site that will be a hub that just helps advisors and firm owners then to bring all those tools we already got at LV, but bring them into one place to make it easier for all those rules that are coming in with consumer duty.
Absolutely. And staying with the topic of consumer duty, do you see it contributing to an increase in protection conversion sales?
And again, this is an interesting one then, isn't it? Because, as I said, because I worked on fair value, I'm a salesman at heart. That's where my background comes from. So to work on a project like the fair value one, where you really cannot see a sales angle in that one, that was an exercise we all had to go through and a lot of work, but you couldn't see the sales angle in it. You couldn't see the opportunity at all. I think consumer duty is very different. Nobody really, let's be honest in all this one, anyone listening today, no one out there is welcoming FCA new rules and change from the FCA. None of us want to embrace that and welcome that. However, I think this one does bring with it opportunity. And I think it's a really good opportunity for people to take a bit of a look at to what they do, what their practice is. Because a lot of it is about, must act It's about avoiding foreseeable harm. There's a lot of rules in there that are driving advisors and firm owners, networks, providers to think about our processes. And I think if you are an advisor or whether you're a firm owner, it is a really good opportunity to actually take a step back, just stop for a moment and look at your processes, because you've got to, from consumer duty, there's lots of bits in there that say about your processes, how you deal with clients, whether they're vulnerable clients or not, but all the way through it's looking at your processes. So if you've got to do it anyway, I think let's look for the opportunity on it. And I think I was describing this to somebody the other day, and the best analogy I could think of on this one really is your car. If you drive a car, your car gets you from A to B. And if it gets you from A to B every day, then it's great. It does what it's there to do. It gets you from A to B. But perhaps what you're thinking is, I've got a really big service I need to do on this car, but actually I get from A to B, so I don't need to worry too much. I think what consumer duty does is it pushes you to do that big service. Because if you think about yourselves as, for those listening today, as an advisor or as a firm owner, you've got your everyday life when you're dealing with the clients, talking about protection, talking about mortgages, and it's getting you from A to B. But if you were to take your car on a really long journey and you were planning that big trip, you would probably go and get that big service done before you went on it, because you'd want to make sure your car is fit for purpose for the long term, for that long run. And I think this is where, again, consumer duty will help advisors and firm owners to take that stop, think about that big service on their businesses or on themselves as a salesperson, to think, okay, I'm getting from A to B, but actually, am I still on that long journey? So, for lots of people out there, they'll have their own personal business plans. They'll have their business plans for their businesses as well. And I think it's a good opportunity, as I said, consumer duty brings that moment in to say, okay, do I need to do that big service? Do I need to look at my processes, the structure, how we deal with clients every day, just to make sure that you're not just getting A to B, your business or yourself and your own plans, you've got it in for the long term. Everybody will have a business plan in place, a long-term plan as to where they want to be financially, perhaps even just in the future. And it's thinking about, actually, am I just getting from A to B, or is what I've got in front of me as a business actually going to take me on that longer journey? And I think that's one of the opportunities consumer duty brings us. It's a little bit forced, I know. It's not anybody asked for it and said, oh, great, why doesn't the FCA write this a new paper just to make me have a look at my business? So it is forcing everyone's hands a bit, but I think, you've got to do it, seize it as an opportunity then, and think about, right, is my business fit for purpose? Is it going to take me on that long journey?
Great analogy, Carl. Not heard anyone refer to it with that car analogy before, but I do quite like that. I think that's a really good way of putting it. And you did give me nightmares thinking back to fair value, which Nikki and I were very heavily involved in last year. And I think we had many sleepless nights thinking about the workload of that paper before we even got to doing it. But, you bang on in terms of what you talk about. And I suppose, sort of sticking on the consumer duty theme, but more from a, I'm a salesperson like you are. Is there a key area you think advisors could focus on to increase their income stream, but actually tie it in and make it feel more aligned with consumer duty?
I think there are, and there's lots of those out there. I think if we take a step back and think about people's businesses for a start, protection is a big one, and I think it does drive people to talk about protection. There are some very heavy terms within the consumer duty paper, some very, very heavy terms. So one of them is that advisors must equip customers. I'm going to read it actually because it is a long one. So if I'm looking down, I'm actually reading it. It must equip customers to make effective, timely, and properly informed decisions. So there's a big one for a start. It has the term must act, avoid foreseeable harm. So these are really heavy terms. But they all lead us into a protection conversation as well. So I think there are great tools, first of all, that people can use. So with the risk calculators that everybody's got, and LV has an outstanding one, which I'm going to say because obviously they sponsor my conversation right here. But I think using a risk calculator is a great way to start talking about protection, first of all. But then when you actually look at some of the other terminology within the paper, there's actually really, really, what I think is an amazing line for us all as people within our industry. if you think about when an advisor talks about a mortgage, you've got that line about your home is at risk. So when you're talking about a mortgage, I know a lot of advisors will use that as their key statement. Your home is at risk if you do not keep up these payments. So I need to be talking to you about protection. And what Consumer Duty, I think, brings in, again, a great line, which is, again, I'm going to read it to get it right. It is to enable and support customers to pursue their financial objectives. So that's one of the drivers for the Act. Enable and support customers to pursue their financial objectives. And I think we actually, as an industry, we probably get hammered a little bit, I think, really, and unfortunately, with that that myth, I think, that advisors sell protection in order to earn money for themselves, to earn an income. We are still a commission-based product with protection, and I think a lot of clients can too easily think, actually, yeah, he or she is only talking to me about protection because they're looking to increase their income and earn a bit more money. And granted, advisors do get paid for it, but you also, as advisors, put a lot of work into it as well. So it's a bit unfair that sometimes that comes first, is to, oh yeah, he or she is only saying this because they'll earn more money from me. So I think actually, first of all, that line, that enable and support customers and financial objectives, is a great line to use with clients. Because it says, the FCA have brought out new guidance, and one of the things that I really must make sure we're doing is talking about protection. And one of those reasons is because the FCA says that I must enable you to reach financial objectives, which I think then when we look at key areas, financial objectives, I think naturally takes you down a route to talking about protection and talking into income protection as well. So when you're using a risk calculator, that will highlight the risks of all the different types of products. But I think especially using that sort of statement about how I'm going to support you to pursue your financial objectives, that's a great way of talking about income. What does an income do for a household? And actually what will happen if that income's not there anymore? So I think it really easily weaves into an income protection conversation. We had an interesting bit. We've recently done a resilience report where we went out to 4,000 people and talked about what would make them feel financially resilient. And it talked about bits and pieces like savings and everything else, and who they rely on if they didn't have their income, that type of thing. There was an interesting one in there, really interesting one, I think, where it actually talked about dependence. So the bit of research we had came back, said that 3/4 of the people we spoke to who said that they had dependents, it was more than one person dependent on their income. So it's thinking about, it's not just the individual and their income, because unfortunately sometimes you can go down that superhero syndrome where, yeah, no, I know I need my income, but I'm feeling fit and healthy and I'm fine. But I think the more advisors talk to clients about the dependence on that income, so is it their spouse, is it their children, is it other members of their family, and then talking about those financial objectives as well, I think that all weaves in very heavily then into a conversation that says we need to be thinking about how important that income is to you and what will happen if you haven't got it anymore.
That ties in nicely to my next question, Carl, to be fair. So, I guess income protection conversations, looking at areas like IP are absolutely key. And, here at Primis, we have a deep, firm belief in that. We constantly driving the protection conversation in our firms. But I guess, one thing we kind of rolls off the tongue at the moment, because we're talking about it all the time, is the cost of living crisis and, all these factors that are going on out there. How do you think advisors overcome some of the possible challenges in respect to things like the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, it's definitely a big challenge, isn't it? I mean, if we think back to the mortgage market and perhaps when we were having the challenges we are currently having in the mortgage market, the last big one of these was probably 2008. But at the time, the actual economy in other ways was actually not too bad. So people were able to talk about protection. And I would guarantee there's a lot of advice